Welcome to University English 2, The Skills. Today we're covering Unit 1, entitled A Body of Communication, or, alternatively, the importance of body language and vocal variety for communication. First, I'll be giving you a brief introduction, and this will be followed by body language, of which there are several aspects: proximity, facial expressions, head and neck signals, posture, gestures, and then vocal variety, which includes volume, pitch, pace, pauses, resonance, and intonation. This will be followed by a summary of your voice or vocal variety, and then a brief talk about how you can go about improving your own body language and use of voice. Now, I like to start all of my introductions with quotations. So this is a quotation from Ralph Waldo Emerson in The Conduct of Life, originally published in 1883. When the eyes say one thing and the tongue another, a practiced man relies on the language of the first. Now, some very interesting research by Mehrabian and Ferris in 1967 showed that actually only 7% of communication is the words that we actually use. 38% of communication is how we say those words, and a full 55% of communication is body language. Now, aspects of body language are very various, but they include some major categories. Things like proximity, facial expressions, head and neck signals, body posture, use of gestures, and even the way you breathe actually communicates messages. Having the ability to vary your voice depending on the messages and the emotions which you wish to convey is known as vocal variety. And of these, there are several aspects, and these include volume, pitch, pauses, resonance, and intonation. Simply put, if you want to communicate, it's not just about learning a language. There are many other aspects to communication as well, which you need to get good at. You need to be a good communicator. Let's start with looking at the difficulties involved in communication and the easiest and most difficult kinds of communication. Now, when you are speaking to somebody face to face, this is by far the easiest kind of communication. And this is because we have all of those aspects, your body language, your use of your voice, and the words that you're saying, all available to us. And this makes communication much, much easier. For those of you who have traveled abroad or met people who are not native speakers of your own language, then you can understand that actually you can communicate quite well when you meet these people, regardless of the fact that you don't speak the same language. And that's because you're using your body language and you're using how you're saying your words, which people can interpret messages from. So face-to-face communication is always by far the best form of communication. The next most difficult kind of communication would be via voice calls or telephone calls. And this is because body language is going to be absent in these cases. And that leaves you with just your voice and just the words that you have to say. Now, it doesn't mean that the 55% of body language just vanishes. No, it means that how you use your voice and the words that you say become more important to the communication, taking up all of that 55% from the gone body language in order to incorporate the full 100%. And as you can see, the most difficult kind of communication is then in writing, written communication. And this is because there is no body language. There is no how you're saying the words. There are only the words themselves. And this is why even amongst native speakers, when you are writing to people, it can be very easy to misunderstand the messages and misinterpret what is meant or the way that it's intended, the message is intended to be conveyed to you. Let's take a look then at body language, and we'll start with proximity. Now, there is some variance in relation to your culture, but where you stand does actually send a message to people. So, for example, this is some research done by Hall in 1966, where he classified different areas: intimate space, personal space, social space, and public space. Now, public space is where everybody will go. Social space is where people will go if they want to talk to you, for example, if they're looking to approach you or perhaps communicate with you in some way. Personal space, people might feel uncomfortable if you are in their personal space and they are not very close to you. And also intimate space, well, unless you're intimate or really close with somebody, a close family member, or a close partner, then approaching somebody in their intimate space will actually make them feel that either you are intending some form of violence towards them, or that you are intending some very strong kind of approach towards them as well. So where you stand actually sends a message to people as well. Next, let's take a look at facial expressions. Now, facial expressions are particularly important for interpreting or understanding emotions. Matsumoto and others back in 2008 actually found that there are 7 emotions which are universally expressed through similar facial expressions. Now, what this means is that if you meet somebody from the other side of the world, you can still understand how they feel from their facial expressions when they are feeling anger, contempt, disgust, fear, joy, sadness, and surprise. So these emotions are quite easy to understand from facial expressions. Now, of course, there are some very culturally specific facial expressions which you would only understand if you were from or very familiar with that particular culture. Next, let's take a look at head and neck signals. Now, the position of your head and neck can also actually convey messages. Now, these messages can be given with movements, and many of them are very culturally specific. So let's take a look at some examples. Now, of course, understand that much of this communication will be happening at the same time as other aspects of communication are taking place. So actually, humans are wondrous creatures in that we can understand all of these things as they are happening in real time. The words they're saying, how they're saying the words, and movements and positioning of different things, the facial expressions, all can be actually understood at the same time together. In relation to head and neck positions, some examples here might be tilting your head to one side, which could indicate curiosity or perhaps interest. Nodding your head up and down means agreement in most places. Shaking your head from side to side might mean disagreement again in most places. One brief nod could be a greeting, could perhaps be a farewell. And lowering your eyes and your head is often a sign of submission, but also a sign of respect. Next, let's take a look at posture. Now, posture is the positioning of your body, and this also has a lot of meaning in it. Now, postures can be adapted for when you are sitting down or when you are standing, as you will see from the examples. And once again, many of these postures messages will vary depending on the culture. Here are some examples. So leaning forward and facing you, this might indicate that the person is giving you their full attention, or perhaps that they are certainly interested in you. Crossing your legs and arms might indicate that the person is aggressive towards you or confrontationally. They want a fight of some kind. Leaning back and looking away might indicate that they are not interested, disinterest, or perhaps simply boredom. Frequent feet and hand movement often indicates impatience or perhaps nervousness as well. And here are examples of how it can be culturally different. So putting your hands in your pockets in the United States often indicates that you are relaxed or feeling comfortable. But if you do the same thing in Germany, this would be interpreted that you are a lazy personality or that you are being disrespectful to those around you. Next, let's look at gestures. Now, gestures are movements of body parts, such as movements of your hands, in particular your hands. And these are, again, used to communicate emotions and messages as well. Now, gestures in particular are very culturally specific. Sometimes they're performed consciously or without thought. Sometimes they can be performed with thought. Here are some examples. So a vertical palm of your hand, showing it to somebody, would indicate stop. Shrugging a shoulder might indicate that you don't understand or you just don't care. Your hand in a fist or your hands in a fist might indicate stress or perhaps nervousness. And here's another example of how it can be culturally variant. So thumbs up in the United States of America means generally good or well done, whereas thumbs up in Thailand is actually an insult. You're saying something very bad to that person. Your breathing as well, this would be very unconscious in most cases, indicates things. Deep breathing indicates that you're feeling relaxed or confident, whereas shallow breathing might indicate that you are nervous. Fast breathing indicates that you're either excited or perhaps nervous as well. Now, in relation to gestures, there are some gestures which are actually quite important. One of them is the handshake. Now, the handshake is one of the most widely accepted physical greetings in the world. Now, the use of handshakes does vary between cultures, but generally speaking, a handshake is used when you meet someone for the first time in the professional world, in the working world. So in a professional context, first time meeting, that's generally when you're going to shake hands. Now, sometimes you might shake hands when you want to say goodbye as a farewell, but usually this is only in very formal meetings when you're meeting very important people. Now, notice that handshakes are generally not used for subsequent meetings. That means after the first time that you have met somebody, you generally don't shake hands every time you meet them again. But again, this might be a little bit different in terms of very formal situations. Also note that handshakes are generally not used when you're meeting informally, such as when you're trying to make a friend or a partner. So if you go to a bar, for example, and you meet somebody in a bar, then in that case, when you introduce yourself to that person, you're not going to be shaking hands. This is not the professional world. So don't offer a handshake. Of course, you can offer your name, but generally we don't shake hands to people that we meet outside of the working world. Okay, so what makes a good handshake? Well, start with the hand. because that's the part of your body you're making the gesture with, make sure it's clean. All right, wash your hands regularly, and also make sure it's dry. So if it's a little sweaty, you might want to dry the sweat off before you offer a sweaty handshake to somebody. Now, the handshake should be firm. It should not be weak or what we call floppy. Also, it should not be too strong either. So these are examples here. On the bottom left, you can see this is the floppy fish. So too weak a handshake conveys that you're not confident in yourself. And the one in the top center there, that's conveying a little bit of a too strong message. You can see that he's crushing her hand in that case. That's more aggression. And you don't want those kinds of handshakes. Instead, you want a handshake somewhere in between, which is indicating that you are confident, but you're not being aggressive. Now, there are, of course, other gestures for greetings. So in East Asia, the bow is one of the most common gestures which is used in greeting. Now, bows are commonly used for greetings and farewells in East Asia, and in a professional context, they may actually accompany a handshake. Now, amongst friends, and also due to hygiene concerns, particularly over the last few years, other kinds of handshakes, which may have originally been popular just perhaps amongst teenagers, have become popular methods replacing the handshake. So, for example, on the bottom right, you can see the fist bump, which has become quite a common greeting ritual. And all of these do the same thing. They are all bonding rituals. Let's move on to voice. Now, many emotions and messages can be actually communicated through the use of our voice, of which there are several aspects. How loudly we speak, which is volume, how low or high our voice is, which is known as pitch, how fast we speak, which is pace, how often we pause, how our voice resonates or resonance, and how we change tone in sentences, which is known as intonation. Now, all of these aspects taken together are known as vocal variety. And if you have good vocal variety, then you will be able to communicate the messages and emotions that you want to communicate in a much, much better way, in a much clearer way, and in a way which people are happy to actually listen to. Now, volume is how loudly we speak, and there are a number of common errors which are made in relation to volume. The first and most common error is speaking too quietly. Simply put, it doesn't matter what language you're speaking if people cannot hear you. You might as well be speaking Martian from the planet Mars, because they're not going to be able to understand if they cannot hear. And especially because of the lockdowns over the last few years, people have become shyer and less apt to actually project or try to speak loudly. So make sure that you try to project your voice, try to speak loudly in most situations so that people can actually hear you. Now, other errors, lowering the volume at the end of sentences. Now, here the listeners might feel that you lack energy and enthusiasm for what you're saying, and they might also feel that you are not very confident as a person. Now, another error is speaking too loudly. In this case, listeners might feel that you are being confrontational, that you're looking for a fight if you're raising your voice and speaking too loudly. Another error is speaking at a constant volume, at the same volume all the time. Now, in this case, the listeners will be unable to understand which parts of your message you wish to put more stress or more emphasis on. Next is pitch. Now, pitch is defined by the rate at which your vocal cords vibrate. And the result is that you will have either a high or a low tone of voice. Now, research has shown that men using a higher pitched voice in economic or romantic contexts and in general are seen as more trustworthy, but less attractive. So this is quite some interesting research. So what this means is if you have a higher pitched voice in the business world or perhaps with a romantic interest, they will trust you more, but they're not going to be attracted to you. So keep that in mind. Now, for women, a higher pitched voice is seen as more attractive and more trustworthy in economic and romantic contexts. But if it's not in the business world or as a romantic interest, then these women will be seen as being less trustworthy in general. So vary the pitch of your voice depending on which contexts you are actually engaged in. Now, pace is how fast or how slow someone speaks. Both of these can actually lead to problems. If you're speaking too fast, there are several problems which can arise. The first is that listeners will just be unable to process the massive amounts of information that you are throwing at them. Also, that information might be difficult to understand because your words are literally running into each other. There are no pauses, there are no breaks between the words, making it difficult to understand. Now, the result is that the listeners will have to concentrate more on what you are saying, and people generally don't like to concentrate for a length of time. It's a real effort, and frankly speaking, a lot of people don't like making continuous efforts in their life. So they might actually just give up listening and stop listening to what you're saying, and then your message is lost. Conversely, if you're speaking too slowly, listeners might just get bored of waiting for you to convey or give them the message, and they might stop listening to the message because people are very busy. And if it takes you 5 or 6 minutes to say what can be said in 30 seconds, then they don't really want to communicate with you. Now, pauses are breaks. And these can be breaks between words themselves or between sentences. Now, pauses can be good and they can be bad. It depends on the situation. So here are some advantages. Pauses actually give speakers time to think about what to say. So if you as the speaker are wondering, I don't know what I'm going to say next, then that's going to result in a pause. And the pause is giving you time to think about what you want to say next. Also, it gives the listeners time to think about what you, as the speaker, have just said. So especially if it's a difficult message, you might want to pause and give them a little time to process or to think about it before you move on. Now, in terms of actual speeches, and this is in particular in relation to speeches, there are such things as rhetorical questions. And these are questions which a speaker might ask, but which he's not expecting a member of the audience to answer. But he's asking the question to provoke thought and then perhaps to answer the question him or herself. A little pause after a rhetorical question gives the audience time to think, and it can make the rhetorical question have much greater impact. Now, there are disadvantages with pauses as well. If you pause too long, you, as the speaker, might forget about what you were saying. And this has happened to all of us, where we are talking about something and we forget about what we were talking about. Also, the listeners might forget about what you said as well. Or, once again, they might just get bored of waiting for you to convey your message. Resonance. Now, your voice resonance, also known as its timbre, is the quality of the sound that your voice actually makes. Now, resonance is formed by the way in which your vocal cord vibrations interact with your cavities, which are making the noise as well. And those will include your nasal cavity, which is your nose, your oral cavity, which is your mouth, and the rest of your throat or your pharynx, and also your chest too. Now, a lot of these are simply physical structures which make it quite difficult to alter this particular aspect of your voice. But a person who has good voice resonance will speak in a rich and pleasant sounding way. And this is the kind of person that you listen to and you just like the sound of their voice. And this is obviously much more appealing to the listeners. Poor voice resonance is something that you want to generally avoid. And this would be where, for example, a person might have a nasally sounding voice. That means it sounds like the person's nose is perhaps blocked in some way. And it does happen when you have a cold, for example, or a raspy voice where the sounds are coming too strongly. The vibrations are too infrequent through their vocal cords. Again, it can be a result of a cold, but some people just naturally speak in this way. Now, while it might be difficult to have a fantastic sounding voice, because a lot of this is related to the physical size of your various cavities, actually, it is possible not to have a poor voice resonance. So you want to try to make sure that your voice resonance is not bad. Even if you can't make it fantastically rich and pleasant sounding. Intonation. Now, this is how we raise and lower the pitch of our voice during speech. Now, if you're using a single pitch only, then you're not using intonation. You're not employing intonation. And the result will be a very monotone, mono meaning one, so very one-tone sounding voice. And the result is that your communication seems passionless. If you look at the picture here, like a robot. Now, monotone voices can actually lead listeners to believe that you're not interested in what you're saying, or you're not interested in talking to them, or they can just feel bored as a result of listening to this rather unappealing single tone. Now, for sentence intonation, a rising pitch at the end of sentences implies either a question, or if it's not actually a question that you're asking, it indicates insecurity, a lack of confidence. Whereas a lowering pitch at a sentence end implies that it's a statement or indicates confidence. So this is quite a useful thing to understand, because if you are making a question and you are lowering the intonation when you're making the question rather than raising it, it starts to sound more like a statement. It starts to sound like you're very confident in what answer the other person is going to give you. Let's summarize vocal variety. Volume is how loudly or how quietly you speak. If you're speaking too loudly, people will feel that you are shouting at them. If you're too quiet, people simply can't hear you. Also, understand that the volume can be varied in between words and in between sentences. And a higher volume can be used in order to bring more stress to particular parts of your message. So do vary the volume of what you are saying. For pitch, it can either be too high or too low. Understand that for men, having a lower pitch voice is more attractive, but in economic and general contexts, it's viewed as being less trustworthy. For women, having a higher pitched voice is more attractive and more trustworthy in economic contexts. But in general contexts, a lower pitched voice is more trustworthy. For pace, you can speak too fast or you can speak too slowly. Somewhere in between is probably better. So a moderate pace is better. But once again, just like with volume, varying actually the pace can actually result in a more intense or less intense part of your message. So faster generally means more passion, and more passion means more intensity. So do vary the pace as well. Now for pauses, there can be either many or few of them. They do give people time to think, and that includes you as a speaker. Sometimes you might pause because you're thinking. And also it might be good for a listener, particularly when it's a difficult part of the message that you have just tried to give. For resonance, you can either have a good sounding voice or a bad sounding voice. Try to avoid in particular having a bad sounding voice. Try to make your voice not too raspy or not too nasally. Intonation is variation in your pitch. And the big mistake here is having a monotone, a single tone, actually, which you're using all the time, and you will sound like a robot. Varying the intonation in your sentences can actually vary parts of the message that you wish to stress, and also understand that at sentence ends, you can indicate questions or you can indicate confidence by actually lowering the pitch of your voice at sentence ends. Now, all of this might sound quite theoretical. The question stands, is it possible for a person to actually improve their use of body language and their use of their voice? And the answer is absolutely yes. And here's how you can do it. Now, a lot of modern technology will make this easy for us. With our cell phones, for example, we can easily make videos which include audio recordings. And by videotaping ourselves, we can, in fact, see our own use of body language and hear our own use of vocal variety. Now, this is going to take a little bit of time, but now that you have knowledge of what good body language and vocal variety means, you can actually assess yourself. So the first step really would be to make that initial recording. Record yourself. And then, with your knowledge, identify which aspects of your use of body language and which aspects with your use of voice actually need a little bit of improvement. For example, you might watch yourself and think your hand gestures are distracting, perhaps to the people that you're talking to, and then try to tackle that aspect. You might think that your volume is too low and try to increase your volume. You might desire to have a lower pitch in your voice, and you might try to lower the pitch of your voice. You might feel that your voice is a little bit monotone and you're not using intonation well, and you can try to use a little bit more intonation. Now, this is going to mean that you will have to consciously try to make these changes in your daily life. And this is where the effort comes, because you'll have to constantly remind yourself to be making these changes throughout your daily life, at least at first. Now, from time to time, you can again record yourself and review your progress and make any more or further changes that you wish to make. After a while, though, the changes that you're making will become habitual. They will become a habit. And then you will find that you do not actually need to make these a conscious effort all the time in order to try to maintain these changes. They will, in effect, have become a part of you. Now, there is a good example from the United Kingdom. where there was a lady called Margaret Thatcher who in the 1970s decided that she would enter the world of politics. She did feel, however, that she needed to improve these aspects of communication, her use of body language and her use of voice. So she actually went about consciously trying to improve them because as a woman, she felt she needed to be more domineering, and in order to command respect from what at that time were most of her male peers in the political world. So she hired herself a coach who essentially had the knowledge that you now have, and could review her because there weren't that many of these kinds of devices easily available to people at the time. And he helped her to make these changes. And she was very successful. Her nickname during the 1980s, when she became the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, was the Iron Lady. And that shows that she could, and she did, in fact, improve these aspects with great success, which really affected her professional life. And so can you. And that concludes today's presentation on body language and vocal variety. Thank you all for your attention.